Hola community, welcome to BlenderToday live, a special episode today with Dalai Felinto from the Geometry Nodes team and other teams, Brush Assets, and I hope to have you more often here because there are plenty of projects in your pipeline. Oh, yeah. But today
we were gonna be talking about simulation nodes, which finally being and made its way into Blender, and it's gonna be part of the upcoming Blender 3.6. And there's much to talk about it, so yeah, why not to come here and talk to everyone?
Talk live, because the team is all over the world, but we have here the live. So we're gonna get to it in a second. There is two community updates, actually community like Blender development updates that have been posted on the code blog, which are codeblog.blender.org, and there you're gonna see two, one for the roadmap and one for the Google Summer of Code. We can start with the Google Summer of Code. Was the first one announced. There is 5 projects that were 5 slots that Blender is going to have in the Google Summer of Code project for this year. One is about Flamenco, the render management system that used by the studio here, video sequence editor, waveform performance, UV editor, to continue the UV editor improvements, shader editor, node preview. So goodbye Node Wrangler.
Well, this is like bringing the good old back. But this is less about the shader preview and more about the little previews on top of each node. So it's more like, hey, welcome back, the little
the Blender internal previews. The next change is for the Outliner 3 refactorings that shouldn't see any user-facing changes, but it should prepare the Outliner for future improvements and getting features for free that are already available in other type of 3 views, as in the spreadsheet 3 view and other parts, but that's on the technical side. Other than that, you can read the details about that the students wrote themselves on each one of the projects. And the next update that it was posted by you also
on Friday, yes,
Friday evening, roadmap update Q2. So what is this?
Basically, we had in the beginning of the year a project to look forward to, which wasn't really a planning, but was a map of what we wanted to work on and what to prioritize.
Yeah.
And then we got together and tried to break this down into specific projects within a timeline. How much of that is the projects that we can get the studio as stakeholders, and then do something aligned to the open movie projects.
For example,
the pattern. For example, the
upcoming
project.
Upcoming project. Code name to be announced this week. Hopefully, we want to announce the next open movie project, but I heard it's going to make use of this guy over here, light linking very heavily.
It is. So interesting enough, we had those planning sessions happen, I think, 2 months ago.
Yeah.
So it was our late March, and then we produced what would be like an internal planning, and then developers started to work on things such as like light linking, and then people were wondering, oh, where that came from. So we said, you know what, let's give people a bit more context, and also for the sake of transparency, we actually shared the entire spreadsheet we were using internally, so we can see a little bit the initial let's call resource allocation, right?
Yeah.
Who is responsible to each project, who is going to be involved in each of the different projects. You can also click on those individual words to get links to follow the project, to know what's happening, to help testing and giving feedback if ever there is a dev talk thread about it.
Yeah, I should use this for when people ask in the comments about like, where is EVNext, when is Vulkan, where is the brush asset, where is light linking? Well,
user cache. Well, that's the thing. This is we call a second quarter planning.
Yeah.
So we have hopes that a lot of this can be done in that time fashion.
Yeah.
But it's not to be taken as literally as that.
No.
Because we want the freedom to be able to shift priorities around to, we bump into unforeseen problems. So do not refer to this as a weekly by weekly planning to go chase developers down the alley. But it's definitely something to give you the full picture, and it's definitely true to what we believe is correct at the moment.
Yeah.
That's gonna change.
And also, this is particularly the projects, not in general, like in Blender general, but those that the Blender Foundation is investing in directly thanks to the Blender Development Fund.
Right, because there are other projects which are driven by the community. I mean, even USD is not there.
Yeah.
But we have a few industry partners, collaborating with code.
Oh.
And those projects are not included just because, these are the projects directly funded by the Blender Development Fund. Most of them.
Speaking of industry, Asifa Hollywood renewed their Diamond membership. Nice. Hollywood. But yeah, you may have seen some numbers, some companies disappearing from this list, and the number getting much smaller. We were reaching $200,000 in dollars. Now it's way less than that. It's not that everybody decided to leave in 1 week. Is that some have already stopped paying, or like they were not renewing the membership some weeks ago already, but this list was outdated. So last week was updated, which means that numbers are lower than expected. So, but this is going up. Individuals is going up, so that's nice to hear. Okay, with this out of the way, let's get to the good stuff. Because as of this week, we have a new part of the Everything Nodes project coming to life, to the part of the Blender main project.
The simulation nodes is a long way coming. In a way, was even one of the first steps of what became geometry nodes. At the very beginning, you could do fireworks.
Yeah.
You could do basic particle simulations. Effects.
In development. It wasn't in
it was
Blender.
Before. Yeah, exactly.
But like the very first iteration that developers went for, it was to replace the particle system in terms of simulation.
Yes. And then even when last year when we decided to prioritize hair development, well, because we definitely wanted to take a look at the physics and starting to have physics integrated with nodes.
Yeah.
And for that, it was easier to first have hair as a new data type in Blender, a new object, a new pipeline, that more modern, more aligned with what we have for the rest of the geometry nodes and the new data types. So it's fast performance. And that'll be a pretty good initial point to, from that, have simulation support in geometry nodes and then in hair and then in everything else. Which is not to say that right now we have hair simulation. That's still to come later. But that means we start to have simulation support.
Yeah, like the building blocks, like a different clock time to which to run, the caching system. There is a whole lot of scaffolding to build around the simulation system.
Yeah, and it's important for people to know the big difference between simulation and animation, just to even understand what's possible now. And because so far, if you follow what people have been building with geometry nodes, a lot of this looked very much like simulation. The difference is that at any moment you could go to any frame and know exactly what was the result. And simulation means that the result of a frame is going to be informing the decision of the next frame. So if something is going fast and is going to keep going fast or falling, you need to calculate, okay, where was I on the frame before, so I know where am I now and where I'm going to be moving forward. So simulation is always calculated from the beginning all the way to the end. And then that's why also if you want to render out in a render farm, you want to bake it on disk so you can render different frames at the same time. And the interesting with simulation is that you can also create very complex behaviors which are with a very simple logic. So have a simple logic and just let the interaction between the different components to actually produce something complex. While before with animation, you need to have all of these inside our mind, and that's unthinkable.
Yeah. So simulation nodes, we know what simulation node is. We need to know what simulation nodes is not at the moment. It's not a replacement of MantaFlow fluid simulations, not a replacement of dynamic paint. Although you could do some similar results, but you need to the UI is not as simple as Dynamic Paint yet, but it is as powerful in some areas. It's not a replacement of cloud simulation, rigid bodies, or all the other simulation types that Blender has at the moment. However, is that the goal?
The goal is to be able to provide as simple to use and as powerful to use solvers, so physical solvers, as we had before. We still don't know how much of this is going to be one, let's call monolithic solver that you can just go in the UI, and on the UI pick a fluid simulation and use from there. Or if you go the route we did for hair, where you just have a preset, add a new fluid simulation, and that adds already a few node groups to your component, to your file. Or if you're gonna have more asset bundles with these high level nodes, again similar to how we did for hair.
Yeah.
In a way to wrap up the the logic in a way, so it's easy for someone to learn the very basics of simulation and geometry nodes, but then have those very high level blocks to just use it yourself.
And it's that planned for 3.6? No, the shipping with assets?
No, for 3.6, what we have right now in the daily build is a pretty good representative of what we're gonna get. We're still fixing bugs. We're still changing the UI a little bit, but basically, if you go to the node editor, go to the simulation category and go in simulation node, this is how you're going to access anything related to simulation. As a matter of fact, if you go to the user manual, this is also, it made sure then that all the information we have about simulation that you need to know, it's all in the same page where you get to see the information about that node.
Simulation specific nodes themselves then is only like what, 2 nodes? 3 with the index?
Just 2 nodes which are specific to simulation. So, and they come as a pair, and they are deleted as a pair as well.
Or they will be? No, they are deleted, but you can still do weird things like duplicate only one of them, but this is it's gonna be fixed.
But they are treated as a pair because they together define the simulation zone. So any zone. Which means that any data that you connect inside of the simulation, in the simulation input, gets exposed also to the simulation output. And in every frame of the simulation, when it's evaluated, you get that data being accumulated. The velocity is a good example, because you can have an initial velocity for a particle to be 0, and then you want every step of the way to calculate the velocity based on the new position, and you can do things with that.
Nice. He's not even using the delta time.
No, people are not using it. Delta time is a feature that's more important if you want the same simulation to work regardless of the scene FPS. So you might still see people using that, but you can even do it without, because you have the scene frame as an input for the simulation input if you want. But we really, if you compare to the blog post we had last October, where we had a lot of inputs and outputs in the simulation nodes, we basically try to strip it down to the bare minimum. So originally we thought you could have the delta time, elapsed time, the option to decide when to start running the simulation, and these very specific outputs. And now we decided to strip it out entirely. Just have the geometry and then the socket where you can just add any other attribute to be passed again to the simulation. So it's not its state is carried over from one frame to the next inside the simulation. And then everything else, all the magic, it happens inside the simulation node.
Everything happens here. How do you know that something is part of the simulation? Is because when you move it, it's attached. It is part of the simulation. But a node that is not part of it is not going to be pushing the simulation out.
So the inputs can always come from outside of the simulation. But when it comes to the output, it has to be outputted as part of the simulation output. So you need to export in the simulation output, and from there on, outside of the simulation node, you can use that. One thing that I would recommend people to go and download the sample file. It's really nice. The sample file we have now by Sean. We're gonna have another one by Daniel soon. Daniel Bysted. This is by Sean Christopherson.
Yeah.
Which illustrate simulation node and the index of nearest node. Super powerful node as well.
This one here.
Yeah. Which allow to do like almost like a collision simulation, because you do a sphere-based comparison. It doesn't matter. It's very fun to play with, and you can see that a lot of the logic is abstracted away inside node groups.
Yeah.
So you can try to use this for your own files, or
you can copy paste things like the velocity, the collider steps, and you can use it on your own projects. This file, if you download it and press play, you're gonna see that it starts to move by itself. This is because it is animated. The sphere is animated, but if you just want to try the interactive mode, in a way, you just need to basically select the sphere, remove the animation, or disable it from, I guess, from the graph, the dope sheet, and then you can just move it around. And this is, I am moving it with my mouse.
Can scale as well.
Yeah, you can.
I think I mentioned that in the README file.
You can scale, drip, drip, drip.
And it looks so beautiful. I really like Sean's files. They all look very eye candy.
Yeah, it's beautiful, and it's also good for learning, right? Learning.
Yeah, and it's also pretty good also for the developers. We found quite a few bugs by testing his file. That's because of why we're developing the baking, why we're developing the attribute propagation. So it's very nice. So thank you, Sean. And it's also an invitation for artists to share your work, share on the social medias. We used to keep an eye on anyone posting hashtag geometry nodes, be where it may. And if you can share your file as a CC BY, please do so. It's really helpful to the development team, to people, to everyone.
For example, Daniel Bysted posted this the other day, yesterday, this demo file online, and today we already have it here in our hands. It's soon going to be uploaded to blender.org, so everybody can try it out. But yeah, basically it's a voids system like you would do with a particle system currently in Blender, but using geometry nodes. And this is not yet uploaded because it could be made simpler or easier to understand. So yeah, it's gonna need some tweaking.
So,
but please, if your file, especially the simpler your file is, please share it so we can have a look.
Yeah. Something to mention, by the way, at SIGGRAPH this year, in August, Simon and I, so Simon Thomas and I, are gonna be representing the Geometry Nodes team, and we're gonna be giving a live, hands-on, live lab session to teach people the basics of simulation nodes. It's gonna be mostly Simon. I'm gonna be around helping to people struggling and to see what do people struggle with.
Yeah.
So there's also an invitation to anyone that's gonna be at SIGGRAPH to register for this event, and of course the content and the material we're gonna share it online as well.
SIGGRAPH is in August, 6 to 10 of August in Los Angeles. Yep. I think we covered everything related to simulation nodes. That was so this is the main introduction. In terms of features, if we're going to talk about what is new in Blender, after the commit that adds simulation support, let's see the commit. Let's see when the magic happened. So geometry nodes add simulation support, and you can here read everything about it by Jack Luke 5 days ago. But right after, there was this commit that adds calculate to frame operator, similar to how other caching systems do in Blender, right?
Yes, because as I mentioned, for simulation, if you're changing the parameters and you want to know what's going to be the result of these in the future frame, so if you're in the frame 100, you need to calculate all the way from the frame 1. You can just update everything under the hood. So this is an operator, a button that you can just click on it and everything gets updated.
Calculates to frame. And if you look at well, yeah, it's called calculate to frame. Then there is also another change, allows skipping frames during simulation.
Yeah, so this is the idea is that although for the correct, accurate simulation, you do need to run it from frame 1 all the way to the frame whatever, final frame. Sometimes you are on frame 200, you have your character running, and then you want to tweak some parameters and try to simulate from that point onward. The result is going to be different than if you had to calculate from the beginning, but it might still be interesting to know, you know what, let me just, I know it's going to be a bit flaky, but what happens there?
Yeah.
So this is to support this.
Nice. For speed, someone is asking, is simulation node using multithreading?
Geometry nodes is using multithreading. A simulation node in that sense is no special.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when possible it is, but I guess, I mean, multithreading and time can you can calculate ahead of time some things.
Yeah,
right?
we don't have, okay, in video games sometimes you do have special physics that you calculate already 2 frames separately, you're calculating a few frames ahead.
Yeah.
We don't do anything smart like that.
All right. So not smart yet. So related to that, I think I'm gonna continue seeing it. There, you have time to see what else is. There's not much new in new in Blender other than this. All the attention went to this mainly. I made a blog post on BlenderToday about the new changes, and most of them are commits. Some are fixes and many cleanups this week. And this is the full list that you can find on BlenderToday. But there is a few changes in Blender itself that I
have 10 more minutes.
All right, let's go through it. So while we're talking about nodes, one change which is it's such a quality of life improvement. So the title goes as follows: improve link drag search value moving. What it means, I think, is copying the value when you use the drag search, the drag link and search for the node. Let me show you. It's actually much easier if I just show you. So in basically anything, so let's do, if we do like if we search for a cube and you have the value here that you really picked with the best intentions, you really pick this number specially, and then you want to add integer, for example, Blender will default to the default value of the slider, which is 0, and now it carries over the values. So that is super handy.
That's super handy. Thank you, Mod. I mean, his name is Iliad, for the contribution.
For working on that. Very nice quality of life improvements. Then we start alphabetically, and let's talk a bit about animation. In the animation section, there is a few changes. One is the user interface improvement, which is gonna make things so much easier to read. I don't know if you've been in the graph editor, animation editors section before, but this is what the key menu used to look like.
I mean, before, yes. Recently, no.
Yeah, well, this is basically over the years, more options have been added, even though they didn't really make much sense. This was the key, but it was called clean channels. So why a channel option in the keys? And the team has made it so much easier to browse, to see. Also, when you search using F3, some of the menus get exposed, so you get some concept. You used to have a drop down also called something like slider operators, which is exposing the way you access a tool as the tool name or tool category. And I think it's better if you just talk about what it does, like blending, smoothing. The other change that was related to animation is that you can rename F-curve modifiers. Isn't that great?
Is this for the grouped F-curve? Oh, the modifiers.
The modifiers themselves,
yeah.
Modifiers, curves. It wasn't possible to rename them.
Wow.
And now you can also select a range in the animation editor. So in the dope sheet, you can, the same way you do in the outliner, when you do select one channel and then shift select another, it will select the range. So nice. I didn't even think this wouldn't be there. Quality of life improvement, so thank you Pratik for working on that. Switching to cycles and Linux and AMD, this, if you like all these three words, then you are in luck, because HIP has been enabled again on Linux systems to use with cycles. So actually you can just look at the code, and yeah, apparently there were some compiler bugs. Not anymore. If you have an AMD GPU with Vega or RDNA architecture, get the latest 3.6.
Thank you, Brecht, for still being there for AMD and Blender and cycles.
Yeah.
Doesn't go unnoticed.
Doesn't. Such as work being done in the compositor. The viewport compositor has two nodes that are now working in the viewport. So it says Realtime Compositor, but I think we should start naming it Viewport Compositor.
Some people didn't get the memo, but yes.
Because real time is, now we have something that is real time, which is physics calculation. Anyway, the nodes that are enabled is Stabilized 2D, which is used for motion tracking. And the other node is the Mask node, which is also used a lot for compositing, but for anything for VFX. I'm
very happy to see the viewport compositor getting closer to feature completion.
Yeah.
I know one of the idea is to make that the only compositor to be used in Blender. There's still a debate when it comes to the technical side of what does that mean to go there. But the first step is to have this feature complete, and is getting there.
Yeah. So thank you, Omar, for working on it, and then at some point they should replace the Blender default compositor.
Yeah, it will.
In terms of UI, there is a couple of changes. One, a huge one for usability. Quick favorites, this menu that allows you to, the Q menu that allows you to shovel pretty much anything. Well, pretty much anything except drop-downs or enums, like many options. There were some settings that were just not possible to be added there, and now they are. So, for example, the set origin menu, you couldn't add it to the quick favorites. The relations to make local, to make overrides, you wouldn't. The convert also, convert menu wasn't possible. There are many menus inside of in Blender that for some reason were not possible. And we got bug reports, we got feature requests, and now it's finally done. So Philip, thank you so much.
Did we get patches for that as well, or no?
I'm not sure, but the patch is by Philip, who also prepares the releases and does bug triaging. Thank you, Philip. The next change is from someone from your land, Brazil. Germano added the proportional editing size to the proportional editing menu. I never noticed that there was no other option to preview the size of the or to even set the size. I never thought about it. Did you?
No, I mean, because who cares? What does it mean to have
proportional size?
But what does it mean to have 0.2 there?
Yeah, right.
So should that really be in the UI?
Well, because it's not pixel based, it's not absolute. It's
proportional to what?
Proportional to what? Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe.
Oh yeah, actually that's a good point.
I mean, I'm just thinking on the spot. I don't know. There's probably a reason, but maybe it's also a good point to
bring it up.
It up.
Yeah. Because in the case of brushes, it's an absolute value. Yeah, makes sense. And while we are in the U, let's talk about UV. And those two, I still have time? Yes. Yeah.
Yes. 6 more minutes top.
2 features landed in the UV editor side of things. One, pin support for the UV packer.
Yes, we have a whole new UV packer. Chris is doing such a nice job, bringing the Blender UV, back into the game, into everyone's agenda. Everyone's excited about it, and this is a feature. I know Daniel brought it up. Daniel Beisted.
Yeah.
Which was to support the new fancy UV unpacking, but sometimes you want to pin something because you as an artist, you know what you're doing better than the machine. Rage against the machine.
So now pin modes, ignore pins, normal, the default. Normal is that we shouldn't use the word normal, right? Because I don't think it's referring to the geometry normal. It's just regular or like default. right?
Probably.
I think so.
I think so, Zanora.
Yeah. Lock scale, lock rotation, lock position of pinned UV islands. And the last change related also to UVs is the improve. Look, Lala is writing down
The
notes.
normals for pins, and then also the
Nice.
proportional scaling.
Working non-stop. And the last change is a new is efficiency improvements on the again on the packing, UV packing, and the change goes as follows. Introduce optimal packing, where the layout is a theoretical best possible for a given input, which sounds like something you always want, but sometimes can be expensive to compute. So if you go to the link here, ericfriedman.github.io.
Because if you're thinking about a light map, sure, you want to be as efficient as possible.
Yeah.
But if you want a texture that you want to be able to edit,
Like a face, for example, you don't want it to be efficient. You just want it to look pretty.
it won't have the continuity, because it can be a texture, you want less distortion.
Good point. Nice. It's cool to see that the developer Chris is actually looking at these very complex setups.
This is a very nice page. It's a classic.
A classic. All right, we actually covered everything that is new as of this week on Blender, geometry nodes, and every other area. Do you have time now?
I'm really running out of time.
Okay.
I know someone asked something about simulation, which I considered to reply, but I forgot already what was the
will cloud
question.
simulation be real time too? Well,
Everything can be real time if you consider that when implementing the whatever solver you have. Right now in Blender, cloth is already real time, right? You can see it.
yeah. Well, I mean real time.
Yeah. But if you think about games and how they are able to cheat a lot by, making things interactive, I think it's probably a good inspiration for people thinking about physics in Blender as well.
It is. And there is one question that people wrote in here 18 minutes ago. In regards to simulation nodes, will the solvers be GPU accelerator or will they be CPU only? Similar.
That's too early to know. If there's a scenario where GPU acceleration might be beneficial, for instance, we foresee having a collision, like solver to handle collision in a specific way, or maybe nodes for that.
Yeah.
So we're definitely gonna have solutions which are specialized for simulation. But I don't think a GPU or CPU is the main point here.
Yeah.
I don't think those things are. I don't know. Probably not. I don't think it makes sense much.
Yeah,
Let's
and
touch them.
often when there is a GPU solution, there should also be a CPU solution if you send it to a farm, or if you don't have a GPU that can handle it, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, for simulation, you can always bake, right? You don't
Yeah.
send, but yeah.
Yeah.
It's too early for that. Babe steps. Let's have fun with what we have. Like, for real. It's like a.
All right. Well, I know you have to go. I'm going to be hanging out here a bit more. I need to read the questions, try to answer them. But I really appreciate you took the time to come over all the way from the other side of the building.
But it's been a while. Like,
It's-
also that I haven't joined one of those, so it's nice to hang out a little bit.
I'm here every Monday around 5-ish.
I might come here more often.
Yeah. What is your
Later
next
on.
project? First simulation nodes.
Next week we have a workshop.
Yeah.
About node tools.
Node tools. Nice.
Yeah. About what does it mean to bring the tools to put the tools on the hand of the artist, not only on the person creating the asset.
Tools, you mean what you find in the toolbar?
It's a mix, but in a way, yes. The vision has, on one hand, is for people to be able to paint which mushrooms that are scattered should be smaller. You want to have a tool that say, add more mushrooms.
Yeah.
And under the hood, the whole geometry node thing's happening. So it's we are looking for solutions for assets. So if you have a geometry node asset that you want to share, you want part of the interface on how to interact with the asset to be embedded on it. We probably want also to be able to change some parameters inside the node tree, inside the viewport. So not a tool per se, but maybe a gizmo.
Exposing gizmos, like modifier gizmo, tool giz. Yeah.
So maybe have like a parameter which is a rotation, and then you want to actually have a empty in the viewport that you can rotate the gizmo with snapping and everything.
That sounds like UI nodes. Kind of.
Oh, it's a UI, it's a UX, the UX layer
Yeah.
logic on top of the functionality. And that's the that's the next big thing we have to think about, because we want a lot of these for the upcoming unannounced yet open project.
Yeah, this week, hopefully this week we'll try. But it is going to be artistic, as in maybe NPR-ish, maybe expect something that is not ultra photorealistic or ultra cartoon like pets, somewhere.
It's gonna look
between.
Beautiful.
The idea is to make something we have never made before.
So keep an eye on the news.
Yeah, keep an eye on the news of blender.org. Thank you once again. Feel free to drop the
Fade
mic.
away.
Fade away and make as much noise as you want when you leave that door.
I'll be sure to be very
I will continue. Wait, look at this nice leopard chair. This came all the way from the old Blender Institute. Okay, now we need to talk. What's new in Blender? Oh, and the reason I use the mushrooms for the example is that it's because the tools were already in. We're trying to implementing it for sprite frights like many years ago. So I think we can see what's new in what people are asking in the chat. So I think I can use this. All right, there you go. I didn't even break that much my setup just to have a guest. Let me know then later how it went in terms of having a guest here. Do you like it? I enjoy it so much. I love it when it makes it much more easy to interact. Let's see what people are asking. Sadek says, hello Pablo, are there any, oh wait, is there anybody voting? Yeah, there is one question here that has one vote, and all right, let's start with the voted ones. Although there's only 7, let's do all of them. Time. Order. Hello Pablo, are there any plans to have Grease Pencil be usable outside of Blender? I don't think that's a question for Blender. That's a question for whoever is importing it from or not. Something like specifications for the format or something like that. I would love to be able to take Grease Pencil, export it into a, for example, file.gp and use it in something like Godot. It's super sad that tools like Grease Pencil, Quill, Dreams never really had true use outside of their platform, and I think that's a damn shame. I mean, there's nothing really stopping whoever wants to import it to take the blend file format and use it, right? Or even to make their own, like try to write Grease Pencil into what? Is it a binary file? Is it a? I think the people should put effort in making not Grease Pencil but Blender files a better importer, for example. Godot has good import for blend files, and Grease Pencil in the near future is going to be no other than curves, which has some little special dust in it. So I think instead of working on just Grease Pencil, just working on improving Blender as a whole, and then you benefit from everything, not only Grease Pencil but all kinds of meshes, metaballs, other objects, and so on. The next question says, hi Pablo, what if we could choose colors for the triangle markers M on the timeline, like 8 options? It could appear on the F2 rename. Oh, like name, like no, not name, but like in the animations here for the markers, like have marker colors. Ooh, yeah, that would be actually pretty neat. And we already have colors collections. We have collection colors, strip colors. We could have marker colors, why not? Yeah, that sounds like a feature that it shouldn't be too hard for a new developer to do. So if you're looking into getting in Blender development, maybe that's something that you can try, or you can ask ChatGPT to work on. But I like the feature, I like it. It's a marker, makes sense. Hello Pablo, in geometry nodes, I noticed that some attributes are not stored as attributes, like the set curve normal node. The curve normal is not an attribute that we can access. Is it intended? I think the normal itself is not the same kind of attribute as other. I don't know if this is because of the missing transition to the new system, but yeah, I think maybe someone, I don't know if it's, I'm checking the chat if there is any developer in the room. No, but not all attributes are accessible. The mesh structure has been being worked on for the past few releases and for 4.0 especially, in order to make more of these attributes generic and exposed in the spreadsheet, for example. So I don't know if there is a special reason for the curves, but also which curves, the new curve or the old curves. We have two types of curves, which is very confusing. I'm not a big fan of having in the object menu convert, you have curve and curves. It's not confusing at all. and why they start with the same letter, but somehow for some reason they're like separate. Just in case we hope people not to. I mean, he has a hair icon, so maybe, but people don't know that's a hair icon. Anyways, sorry, I'm not sure. But you can actually, these kind of questions, you can just drop by the geometry nodes or everything nodes channel in Blender chat and ask there, because people there will know. It's like blender.chat and then channel, and then there is, I think, everything nodes. I think. Let's see. Yeah, everything nodes. There, you can ask about everything nodes in this channel. There's people chatting, discussing, so let's see. The next question. Finn says, hi, hello, hola Pablo. Will the viewport compositor be ready on all platforms for 4.0 to replace the old one? No. I wish, we wish, but no. The viewport compositor is not, it's working on all platforms, like, should be working on all platforms, but it's not replacing the old one yet. Having nodes only GLSL and not the C version anymore will make implementing new nodes much easier. Yeah, no, but the viewport compositor only GPU still would need some kind of CPU backend, like a fallback. So yeah, no, it's not gonna happen only for 4.0, especially. It's too early, too soon. 4.0 starts next week. 4.0 alpha, like the development side. Next question. The simulation nodes we answered. I recently got into using open shading language for cycles, and I thought it would be cool if there is a sort of scripting language for geometry nodes. Would something like this be possible? Houdini apparently has something like this. I don't know, because in Houdini, I would say, I think they have some kind of compiling in built in, right? So if you can script a node, but you have to compile it. Blender doesn't have that concept yet, so that will have to be implemented first. Would be great but you could just use Python, right? And then compile it into like animation nodes. I wonder who made animation nodes. It's the same person that made that. It's one of the main developers of geometry nodes, so that's why I joke about it. Are multipasses and Cryptomat coming to the viewport compositor? Yes, that's the plan. Actually, I think in the geometry node, in the blog roadmap, there is a mention about that. Internet here is so slow. Here, okay, so roadmap update, and then here, and then there is Eevee next. Viewport compositor, there is Eevee render layers, which also means passes, and Eevee next. So yeah, it is planned. It would be cool if we could expose. Also, Cryptomat should be it's also planned. I believe there was a preview for Cryptomat. Where was it? Where did I see that? I saw a preview of it. Armut, it would be cool if we could expose drop-down menus in all groups. Yeah, that would be awesome. Unfortunately, UI stuff are very complex. But since well, actually, for this kind, you need a new node altogether, right? You need a way to expose, to create your menu and expose the settings. But yeah, I agree. Ibrahim says, Hola Pablo, I never got my question answered. I hope I can today. Function request. Add an option to the chamfer, to the bevel modifier, so we choose the bevel corner metering type. Example, it can chamfer as uniform or radial. This content is available in other 3D software, and to see images as examples. Since I'm unable to share links here, you can share links here. This is Blender community. You can share anything you want there. You can't on Blender Blender official websites. Blender community still is an independent initiative. But I guess if this is the kind of the corners, that's what nodes are for, says Nub. Yeah, but also, I mean, if we have a modifier, if we have a operator, this should be exposed. I mean, much more easy to access, right? Radial chamfer. Yeah, no. I agree. I mean, many modifiers should be moved into be their own geometry nodes modifier. There was a project, a Google Summer of Code project back in the days, back a few years ago, that would allow, it would convert some modifiers into nodes. The problem was that I think it was just like a one node per modifier, which it's one way to go about it, but I think the best would be to have a bunch of nodes, building blocks that make up the equivalent to one modifier as a one node group, maybe like an asset, and then it could be replaced. But yeah, other than that, no. All right, so I hope that was the last question. I hope you had a great day. How's the chat? Everything fine? Did I miss anything? I'm glad you mentioned animation nodes. Question: if there are plans to integrate animation nodes like script behavior, this is what I just mentioned. And reading CSV, I think the team mentioned this they mentioned it. That was brought up during lunch one of these days about having CSV and how the community is requesting it. So maybe it should be added. But yeah. I made a bevel add-on. I'm going to see if I can add radiance for my bevel magic. Mr. Steve! Don't we have a bevel add-on? Bevel? I don't know. No, we don't have a bevel add-on. So what do you think about adding your add-on there to the list of Blender community test add-ons? Currently learning Houdini. It's amazing, but Blender is my love. It's okay to have many loves in some countries. What else? Make your own node grease pencil. Since your own special song. Sing your own special song. Make your own grease pencil, even if you're making it alone. PT, are you maybe GPT and writing your own? Oh my god, GPT is like grease pencil training. Sergey has to be your guest. Yeah, it's always good when other members of the Blender Foundation showing Blender today. Yes, isn't it great? Somebody let's see, we get jealous, Pablo, about what? Dynamic wrinkles. I wish they would implement dynamic wrinkles. By the way, the team at the Blender Studio had made something like that already. If you go to studio.blender.org, and then it was, I think, in the in here in charge, project charge, and then inside of charge there was a video about the wrinkles, blinking test, hair grooming. Where was it? Content gallery. If I find it, I'm gonna search, and then wrinkles. Yeah, procedural wrinkle map tech showcase, and the procedural directional wrinkle map system. There you go. This is basically what you had in mind. So when you stretch, like a stress map, so when you change, you transform this, you're basically changing the opacity of the wrinkles. So you can find it here. Just search for procedural directional wrinkle map system in Blender Studio. I'm gonna paste it. Please improve realistic bloom. How is realistic bloom? I know, but how's realistic bloom? Is bloom realistic? Because you only see it. I mean, if you add a filter to the camera, you can get bloom. So maybe that's what you mean. Please give more focus to the new topo with preservation of faces, sculpting textures is really important. There is someone working on it. The topo, or dynamic topology, it is part of the what was mentioned here in the blog post. There is sculpting dynamic topology refactor, which you can click on and read more about it. But it is part of the priorities. Actually, if you look at the development fund.blender.org, you can click on the grants page, and under grants you can see that there is one developer working on Sculpt. There is one developer working on UV. There is some parts of Blender are unfortunately like one developer. There is like one developer working on Eevee, one developer working on different areas. Well, Eevee it's a bit split with the rest of the team working on GPU stuff. But yeah, unfortunately, some areas of Blender really rely on like the one developer or community contributions. Unfortunately, sometimes people say that this number is huge, but actually it's not that huge especially when it depends on some of big companies only. So that's why if I would love if these individual numbers would go up, because it makes it harder for this thing that happened last week, that the number went down dramatically because it's spreading to more people. It's less likely than 1,000 people will drop their subscriptions than one big company, two big companies. Please like the stream. Yes, please. Will cloud simulation be in real time? Anyone else going to SIGGRAPH or Big Blender Conference? I am going to SIGGRAPH and I'm going to the Blender Conference. So come. There are dates, by the way, to the conference already set. So if you go to 2023, the dates are set in stone, but the page is still not open for like proposals for talks and presentations. But then dates are there, 26th to 28th of October. And surprisingly, the same time of the year as every year, the last weekend of October, here in Amsterdam, in the same place. So if you need to find a hotel or a accommodation, it's in the same place as last year, which is in the Keizergracht. I need water to say that. Keizergracht. There you go. Dutch. To speak Dutch, you need You need to have a strong voice. What else? Run selection is so cool. It is so cool. Pratic is cool. What else? No more having to disconnect the node to copy a color and then connect it again. Yes, right? Fix box cutter. Box cutter is made by it's not made by Blender. Box cutter is made by, what is the name? They are actually on the development fund, so I can find them. Cutter, there. Hard Ops, Box Cutter, Team C. So yeah, these people, and they have actually subscriptions in all 3 levels. Well, not the corporate levels, but in that, in gold, in platinum, and in titanium. But you need to ask them because they're the maintainers. Are there any plans to implement VDV into Blender? What do you mean? What do you the VDV mean? Shift A, volume, import open VDV. So I'm almost reaching 1 hour, but for the first time, since I have a bit of time, I'm going through the questions here. With Blender add .geo or .bgeo. Not sure what that is. For just the geometry, to export only the geometry. When simulation nodes will be available? It is available already if you go to builder.blender.org. You go to builder.blender.org. Daily builds, get the 3.6.0 alpha. Again, it's under development, so don't use it on serious productions, just like any other release. And play with it. What else? Will there be an everything nodes for them? I bet the community is already working on it. Are they doing this to try and compete with Ember Gen? Not at all. Blender's own simulation system is really behind. This is not to compete with anyone. This is just to bring the tools that are in Blender, to improve the tools that already exist in Blender. I don't know when Ember Gen was made, but Blender has had simulation in all its states for decades now. Hey, can you help me? Why Blender 3.5 gets crashed down when switched to shader viewport? Maybe something with your graphics. Shader viewport, it means like when you change to the shading viewport, it switches the view to preview mode, which means it's triggering the compiling of the shaders using your graphics card. So make sure your drivers are up to date, like your graphics drivers are up to date. And if so, and still happens, go to help, report the bug, please. Sean is a graphics programmer, so he definitely knows what he's doing. That's why. So I'm assuming the sim nodes don't need to bake. They can run real time, like without baking, but if you want to keep them around, it's gonna be baking to disk. Is it already possible to use the geometry hair for animation? No. Oh, for animation, you mean like no, not dynamic. Remember this comment. I will give a presentation at the Blender conference in 2 years. Evni Bacht. Remember, save this. Will there be a node for time randomization? Say to create a crowd with one animation and make each copy random by time. Absolutely, you can use random in... you have random values already. I don't see why not. Is particle nodes a part of simulation nodes? Not yet, no. You can run particle, like, well, not particle, but points simulations with points. Actually, the demo of the index of nearest is actually using points and then interpolating. So it gets the geometry and then it's instancing on those points an icosphere, which sets smooth and then it sets a material. So it is using points which are like particles, but it's not the particle system already in Blender. Should I start using this over the 3.5 alpha geometry node? Jesus, yeah. the current, because this one is in master, in main, so it's in the main development branch, so it's the latest and greatest. No need to use the 3.5 alpha version anymore. Welcome to the simulation zone. Is there a difference between, well, I'm almost running out of time, and this is a very nice question to end the show. Is there a difference between Blender Studio and the Blender Foundation? What a question. It can be confusing, right? So Blender Studio is, if you go to YouTube and see Blender Studio, it makes it very clear what is what. So Blender Studio, it's a company that is here in the same building as Blender Foundation, the Blender Institute, and Blender. There is one Blender building, basically. Blender Studio makes these films, which you may recognize: Sprite Fright, Charge, Spring, Caminandes, Coffee Run, Sintel, and so on and so forth. So this is what the studio is making, is creating. There is, by the way, this week I think there will be a new Blender Heads video. So yeah, actually, this brings me to the difference. So this is Blender Studio. They use Blender every day, and they test Blender. They break Blender pretty much, because the one requirement for the Blender Studio is to use the latest Blender always. Like, even if it's broken, they have to use it, because that's how Blender gets fixed. And in the meantime, they develop different techniques that they share in the open. So in studio.blender.org, like this wrinkle test, for example, this is research and development that the studio does using Blender, of course, and sharing in the open. So you get for example, the pipeline and the tools. Blender is, the idea of the Blender Studio is to make a studio pipeline, like the render management with Flamenco, using Kitsu, for example, for the rest of the asset managements and the shots and everything. The Watchtower to see your whole production, and Blender itself, Shaman for the SVN, or SVN Man, the manager for well, basically all the tools that Blender uses to make these films. That's the Blender Studio. It's open knowledge, open tutorials, open everything. It is under a, well, some of the content is under a paid subscription, because these people need a salary, and the Blender development, the development fund, it's not paying that. The development fund is not paying for these films. It's paying for Blender development and other things, like my salary, for example. The Blender Foundation is very clear to see. Well, in a way, if you go to Blender Foundation, you see that there is, hey, update, someone is transmitting live. The Blender conference, the reels, the I don't know, the tutorials, the fundamentals, the Blender Heads, for example. If you go to Blender Heads, like maintaining this place, this room, like everybody coding here, like the building, facilitating the building, Ton cutting a cake for everybody here in the team working together. That's Blender as a whole. The Blender Foundation is a part of that whole Blender family. The Blender Foundation is the one that takes care, that is a foundation, so it's non-profit, and it handles everything that has to do with licensing, with the Blender code, and it's a way to keep the commercial aspect of Blender Studio with subscription paid stuff, and away from Blender itself, to keep Blender safe. That is the main reason why there is a foundation and there is a studio. So when you donate to Blender, you can donate in three ways. You can donate via the Blender Development Fund, which is what we saw today. You basically subscribe for $5 per month, and you can help Blender development directly. But there is also one-time donations, for example, when you only want to donate once. You have a bit of some crypto left from the last crypto days, or some PayPal, and you want to pay directly to Blender. This money goes to the Blender Foundation as a donation. which you can write off your taxes because it's a foundation. So some people prefer this way. This also helps Blender, pays for this building, for Ton's salary, for the Blender store. You can also, that's another way of contributing to Blender, is by getting some goodies or some clothing at the Blender store, for example. This also contributes to Blender. But the studio also contributes to Blender. So if you want, you can use all of them. But if you only care about tutorials, then you can use the Blender Studio. If you only care about getting something in return, like physical, then you can use the Blender store. But if you only care about Blender development, just development, nothing else, then you have the development fund. So there is a bit of variation there. So if you want to contribute and get something in return, there is all the ways that you can help. But you can also help by liking this video. What do you think? Or by tuning in again next week around the same time, but definitely the same place, for another week of updates. I wonder what is gonna make it for next week, because Blender 4.0 is gonna be alpha next week. Blender, oh wait, no. Next week, Monday, is not. It's next week, Wednesday. So actually next week, maybe, yeah, it's gonna be, I don't think we're gonna be big things, because simulation nodes was the only missing part of that. I wonder if we should skip it. Nah, let's do it again. Maybe a short one next week. Other than that, I think I'm gonna be wrapping it up, because I have to do this again in Spanish in a few hours. Other than that, thank you again for tuning in. I hope you have a great week. And I hope you, if you're wearing headphones, that you watch out, because in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Was that allowed? Thanks everyone. I hope you have a fantastic week. Now you have a bunch to have fun with. Simulation nodes. Go. Try. Make crazy things. Share with the developers. Maybe you can help us to show the power of simulation nodes, because it is really technical at the moment, but if you know how to use it, you can do amazing things, just like many other parts in Blender. We need to work on that. All right, see you next week. Bye. Ciao. Great week, everyone.